My husband's coworker told everyone I was emotionally unstable so she could replace me in his life and then tried to get me fired from my job. My husband's coworker spent 6 months convincing everyone at his office that I was emotionally unstable so she could slide into my spot, and then she actually tried to get me fired from my own job when I figured out what she was doing. I am 29, my husband is 31, his name is Elliot, we have been married for 4 years, together for 8, we live in a suburb outside a city that mostly exists because of the industrial park and the university satellite campus, the kind of place where chain stores outnumber local ones but people still act like it is a tight-knit community. I work remotely doing quality assurance for a software company that makes inventory management systems, boring but stable. Elliot works in project coordination for a mid-sized civil engineering firm that does contracts with a county, roads, drainage, that kind of thing. His coworker, I will call her Iris, started at his company about 2 years ago. She came in as an assistant project manager, young, maybe mid-20s, very polished in that LinkedIn headshot kind of way, always dressed like she was about to give a presentation. Elliot mentioned her a handful of times early on, mostly in the context of work stuff. She was eager, asked a lot of questions, seemed competent. I did not think much of it. People have coworkers, that is how jobs work. The first time I actually met her was at the company's summer gathering last year. They rented out a pavilion at this regional park with picnic tables and a volleyball net that nobody used. Spouses and partners were invited. It was one of those mandatory fun events where everyone stands around with paper plates pretending the potato salad is good. Iris made a point of coming up to me early, shaking my hand firmly, telling me she had heard so much about me. Her smile was wide and lasted a fraction too long, like she was holding a pose. She asked what I did. I told her. She immediately launched into this story about how she had considered going into tech but found it too isolating, that she needed human interaction to feel alive. It felt like a small jab but I brushed it off. Later, she and Elliot were talking near the grill about some project timeline. I was sitting at a table with a couple of other spouses who were half paying attention to their phones. I glanced over and saw her laughing at something he said, touching his arm briefly. Again, it did not set off alarms. People are friendly at work events. I went back to my phone. Over the next few months, her name came up more often at home. Elliot would mention that Iris had a great idea in a meeting, that she had stayed late to help him finish a report, that she brought in pastries for the team, small things, but the frequency increased. I started noticing he would check his work messages more at night, even on weekends. When I asked why, he said Iris sometimes had questions about ongoing projects and she liked to loop him in early so they could stay ahead. It made sense on the surface. He has always been the type to take his job seriously. Then one evening, maybe 6 months ago, we were sitting on our back deck, which overlooks a line of identical fences and a couple of sad-looking trees the builder planted. He mentioned casually that Iris had asked if we wanted to grab dinner sometime, the 3 of us. She was new to the area and trying to make friends. I said sure, why not? We set a date, picked a place, a casual spot near the mall with booths and too loud music. The night of, I got dressed. We drove over. She was already there, sitting in a corner booth, waving. Dinner was fine on paper. We ordered, we ate, we talked about work, the area, traffic, normal stuff, but there was this undercurrent I could not name at the time. She kept steering the conversation back to Elliot, asking him about projects I knew he had already told her about, laughing at things that were not particularly funny. Whenever I spoke, she would nod politely but her eyes would flick back to him within seconds. At one point I mentioned that we were thinking about repainting our bedroom. She interrupted to ask Elliot if he remembered the color scheme they had picked for the office redesign, as if that was somehow more urgent than my sentence. On the drive home, I told Elliot it felt like she was more interested in him than in making friends with both of us. He laughed it off, said she was just enthusiastic, that she probably felt awkward and defaulted to work talk because that is what they had in common. I wanted to believe that, so I did. A few weeks later, Elliot came home looking rattled. I asked what was wrong. He said there had been an incident at work. Iris had apparently confided in him that she was going through a rough time, family stuff. He was vague on details. She had cried in his office. He felt bad, wanted to be supportive. I told him that was kind of him but to be careful about getting too involved. He looked at me like I had suggested he kick a puppy. He said she was a colleague in distress, that he was just being a decent human. After that, the dynamic shifted in ways that were hard to pin down but impossible to ignore. He started working later, sometimes not getting home until after 8. When I asked why, he said Iris needed help catching up on a big proposal, that she was overwhelmed. He started taking calls in the other room, saying it was just work but keeping his voice low. I started feeling like I was monitoring him, which I hated, because I am not that person. I do not go through phones. I do not demand explanations for every minute, but something felt off. One night, about 4 months ago, we got into an argument. I do not even remember what started it. Something small, dishes, plans, whatever. In the middle of it he said I had been on edge lately, that I was picking fights over nothing, that maybe I should talk to someone because I seemed stressed. The word stressed landed weird, like it was in quotes. I asked him what he meant. He backpedaled, said he was worried about me, that work had been busy for me too, that we were both burned out. I let it drop, but that phrase, picking fights over nothing, stuck in my head. A couple of weeks later, I ran into one of Elliot's coworkers at the grocery store, a guy named Joel who works in the same department. We made small talk in the produce section. He mentioned he hoped I was feeling better. I asked better from what? He looked uncomfortable, said he had heard I was dealing with some health stuff, that Elliot had mentioned I was having a hard time. I felt my stomach drop. I smiled, said I was fine, and got out of there as fast as I could without looking like I was fleeing. I called Elliot from the car, asked him why Joel thought I was sick. He sounded genuinely confused at first, then said he must have misunderstood. Elliot had mentioned that I had been tired. Maybe Joel took that the wrong way. It sounded plausible, but the unease would not go away. Then I got a message on a neighborhood social app from someone I vaguely knew, a woman who lived a few streets over. She asked if everything was okay, said she had heard through a mutual connection that I was going through something difficult. I stared at my screen trying to figure out what mutual connection we even had. I asked her where she heard that. She said her husband worked with Elliot. I felt the pieces start clicking together in a way I did not want them to. I did not confront Elliot right away. I needed to know more. I started paying closer attention. He would mention things Ira said, ways she had helped him. He talked about her with this tone that was just a little too warm, a little too familiar, but there was no evidence of anything physical, no late-night texts that I could see, no perfume on his shirt. It was like she was building herself into his life in this emotional space, and I was being painted as the obstacle. The breaking point came when I got a call from my own manager, a woman named Petra who I have worked with for 3 years. She asked if we could have a private video meeting. My heart started pounding. I logged on. She looked uncomfortable. She told me that someone had contacted the company through the general HR email claiming to be a concerned party, saying that I was struggling with personal issues that were affecting my work quality, that I might need support or a leave of absence. I felt like the floor had been pulled out from under me. I told her I had no idea what she was talking about, that my work had been fine. She agreed, said my metrics were solid, but HR had to follow up on things like this. She asked if there was anything going on at home I wanted to share. I said no, everything was fine. She said okay, that they would close the inquiry, but if anything came up I should let her know. I thanked her and hung up, then sat at my desk shaking. I knew. I did not have proof yet, but I knew. I opened my laptop, started searching. I went through Elliot's social media, which he barely used. Nothing there. Then I checked the company website, found Iris's profile, clicked through to her personal accounts. They were mostly private, but her professional one had photos from work events. In one of them, from a happy hour a few weeks ago, she was standing next to Elliot, his arm around her shoulder, both smiling. It could have been innocent. Coworkers pose like that all the time, but combined with everything else, it felt like a puzzle piece snapping into place. That night, I waited for Elliot to get home. He came in around 7:30, tired. I asked him to sit down. I told him about the call from my manager. His face went pale. He asked what the person had said. I repeated it. He looked horrified, said that was insane, that he had no idea who would do that. I watched his face carefully, asked if he had told anyone at work that I was struggling. He hesitated, then admitted he had mentioned to a couple of people that things had been tense at home, that I seemed stressed. He swore he never said anything about my job. I asked who he had talked to. He listed a few names. Iris was one of them. I asked why he was discussing our private life with her specifically. He got defensive, said she had asked how he was doing, that he had been venting. That is what people do. I told him venting is one thing, but painting me as unstable to his coworkers, and apparently to whoever contacted my job, was another. He insisted he had never called me unstable, that whoever reached out to my company had twisted things. We went in circles. I could tell he believed what he was saying, that in his mind he had just been expressing normal frustration, but I also knew that Iris had been there, listening, absorbing, shaping a narrative. I told him I wanted him to set a boundary with her, to stop confiding in her about us. He agreed, said he would keep things professional. I wanted to believe him, but I also started planning, because I knew this was not over. The next day, I did something I never thought I would do. I made a fake profile on a professional networking site, bare bones, just enough to look real, and I sent Iris a connection request from an account that looked like a recruiter. She accepted within an hour. Her profile was pristine, lots of posts about leadership and growth. In her activity feed, I saw she had been commenting on Elliot's posts, small things, encouraging words, emoji reactions. I scrolled back through months of this. It was constant. I took screenshots of everything. Then I went further. I looked up her previous job, found a few people who had worked with her, sent polite messages asking about her work style. 2 people responded, both said she was competent but had a pattern of getting overly involved with colleagues' personal lives. One person mentioned she had caused tension in their office by inserting herself into someone's relationship. They did not elaborate, but it was enough. I compiled everything into a folder on my desktop, screenshots, dates, the message from my manager, notes on every time Elliot had mentioned her. I did not know what I was going to do with it yet, but I wanted it ready. I also started keeping a log of my work, every task, every email, every metric, so that if anyone questioned my performance again, I had a paper trail. A week later, I got another message, this time on a personal email I barely use. The address was generic, something like concern.observer.404. The message was short. It said I should ask Elliot what really happened at the office retreat last month, the one I had not been invited to because it was employees only. My stomach turned. I stared at that message for a long time, trying to decide if it was real or if someone was messing with me. I forwarded it to myself from another account so I would have a record. Then I asked Elliot about the retreat. Casual. Just how was it? What did they do? He said it was boring. Team building exercises. A catered lunch. Nothing special. I asked if anything unusual happened. He said no. Why? I told him someone had sent me a weird message implying otherwise. He looked genuinely confused. Said he had no idea what that could be about. Maybe someone was stirring up drama. I did not push further that night, but the message sat in my brain like a rock. 2 days later, I reached out to Joel, the coworker I had run into at the grocery store. I sent him a direct message on a professional site, kept it light, said I had a random question about the retreat, asked if he remembered anything unusual. He took a while to respond, then said, "Look, I do not want to get in the middle of anything, but there was a moment where Iris made a toast and mentioned Elliot specifically. Called him her work husband. Some people laughed. Some people looked uncomfortable. He said he did not think it meant anything, but a few people had talked about it after. Work husband, I sat with that phrase. It is one of those things that can be a joke or a red flag depending on the context. I thanked Joel, told him I appreciated the honesty, then I sat at my desk and made a decision. I was not going to sit back and let this keep building. I was going to handle it, but I needed to be smart, because the second I went after her openly, I risked looking exactly like the unstable person she was trying to make me out to be. So I waited, I watched, and I let her make the next move, which, as it turned out, did not take long. Update 1 month later. Things got worse before they got better, but at least now I know exactly who I am dealing with, and so does everyone else. After I found out about the work husband comment, I started keeping an even closer eye on everything. I did not tell Elliot about that part because I knew he would just defend it as a joke, and maybe on some level it was, but jokes like that do not come out of nowhere. They come from a place where someone has already decided they belong in a role they do not. About 2 weeks after my last post, I got a friend request on a personal social account from someone I did not recognize. The profile looked real enough, a few photos, a couple of mutual friends who I did not actually know that well. I almost ignored it, but something made me click through. The mutual friends were people who worked adjacent to Elliot's industry, not directly with him, but in the same professional orbit. I accepted the request just to see what would happen. Within a day, that person sent me a message. It was friendly at first, saying they had seen me at some event I definitely had not attended. I responded politely saying they must have me confused with someone else. They apologized, then pivoted, asked how I was doing, mentioned they had heard I was dealing with some stressful stuff. There it was again, that phrase, stressful stuff, like it was a script. I asked point blank who had told them that. They backpedaled, said it was just something going around, that they hoped I was okay. I thanked them and did not respond further, but I screenshotted the whole exchange. I was starting to see the shape of this. Iris was not just talking about me to people at Elliot's office. She was building a network of whispers, creating this image of me as someone who was falling apart, and she was doing it in a way that was just vague enough that nobody could pin it directly on her. I decided to test something. I posted a very normal update on my account, nothing dramatic, just a photo of a meal I made with a caption about trying a new recipe. Within an hour, Iris liked it. That might not sound like much, but she was not connected to me. She would have had to be actively searching for my profile to see it. I went to her page. She had posted something around the same time, a quote about resilience and supporting people through difficult times. The comments were full of people saying she was so kind, so thoughtful. I wanted to scream. At home, Elliot was trying. He had pulled back from her a little. He was home earlier most nights. He stopped taking calls in the other room, but I could tell he still did not fully get it. He thought this was about jealousy, about me being uncomfortable with him having a close work friend. He did not see that this was not about friendship. This was about replacement. Then my manager Petra reached out again. This time she sounded more serious. She said HR had received another email. This one included specific examples of work I had allegedly done poorly, projects with typos, missed deadlines, things that were either completely made up or wildly exaggerated. She told me she had gone through my records herself and none of it matched reality. But the fact that someone was this persistent was concerning. She asked if I had any idea who might be targeting me. I told her I had suspicions but no proof. She said if I could bring her anything concrete, they could potentially take action. I asked what kind of action. She said it depended on what I found. But if someone was harassing me, especially in a way that interfered with my work, that was something they took seriously. I thanked her and told her I would see what I could do. That night, I sat down with my folder of screenshots and notes. I realized I needed something more direct, something that tied Iris specifically to the messages about me. I started thinking about who else might have information. I reached out to one of Elliot's other coworkers, a woman named Simone who had been at the company longer than Iris. I did not know her well, but we had chatted briefly at a few events. I sent her a message saying I wanted to ask her something in confidence. She agreed to meet me for lunch. We met at a sandwich shop in a strip mall near her office, the kind of place with laminated menus and wobbly tables. I kept it vague at first, asked how things were at the company. She said fine, then paused, then said actually, things have been kind of weird lately. I asked what she meant. She said there had been some tension in the office, that Iris had been making comments about people's personal lives, that it was creating an uncomfortable environment. I asked if she had ever heard Iris talk about me. Simone hesitated, then said yes. She had overheard Iris telling someone that Elliot was stressed because his wife was going through something, that he was being really supportive but it was taking a toll. I asked when this was. She said a few months ago, around the time I had started noticing the shift. I thanked her, told her I was trying to figure out if Iris had been spreading rumors. Simone looked relieved, like she had been waiting for someone to bring it up. She said she was not the only one who had noticed that a few people had started avoiding Iris because of how much she talked about other people. That gave me an idea. I asked Simone if she would be willing to write down what she had heard, just for my records. She said she would, but she did not want it to blow back on her. I promised I would keep her name out of it unless absolutely necessary. She sent me a detailed email later that day outlining multiple occasions where Iris had made comments about me, about Elliot, about their supposedly close working relationship. It was more than I had hoped for. Armed with that, I went back to my own HR. I sent Petra everything, the screenshots, the timeline, Simone's email, the fake recruiter profile interactions. I explained that I believed someone at my husband's company was deliberately trying to damage my reputation and interfere with my employment. Petra called me an hour later. She said this was serious, that they were going to loop in their legal team, that if someone was engaging in targeted harassment that crossed into my workplace, there were steps they could take. She also suggested I consider filing a police report, not because they could necessarily do anything immediately, but because it created an official record. I had not thought of that, but it made sense. I called the non-emergency line, explained the situation. They told me to come in and fill out a report. I did. The officer taking my statement looked tired. He said cases like this were hard to prove, but that having it on file could help if things escalated. I left the station feeling a little more solid, like I was building a foundation. At the same time, I knew I needed to handle the situation with Elliot more directly. I sat him down one night after dinner. We were at our small kitchen table with the overhead light buzzing. I laid out everything, the comments, the pattern, the messages to my work. I told him this was not about him having a friend. This was about someone actively trying to take my place. He looked shaken. He said he had no idea it had gone this far, that he thought Iris was just being supportive. I asked him to think back over the last few months, to really think about how many times she had inserted herself into moments that should have been private, into decisions that should have been ours. He sat there quietly. I could see him replaying things in his head. Finally he said he had been naive, that he had not seen it because he did not want to believe someone could be that calculated. I told him believing it now was what mattered. He agreed to talk to his manager, to flag that there was an issue. He also said he was going to set a hard boundary with Iris. No more personal conversations, no more venting, strictly work. I told him I appreciated that, but I also told him I was not waiting around to see if she would stop. I was going to make sure this ended. A few days later, Elliot had a meeting with his manager and HR at his company. He explained that Iris had been making inappropriate comments about his personal life and that it had started affecting his home. They took it seriously, said they would look into it. I did not know what that meant in practice, but at least it was on their radar. Then, exactly 1 week later, I got a message from an unknown number, no caller ID, just a text that said, "You are making things worse for yourself." I stared at it, my hands shaking. I screenshotted it, sent it to Petra, sent it to the police report number they had given me. Then I blocked it, but another number texted an hour later with something similar. I realized she was not going to stop. She was escalating. That is when I made the decision to go directly to her workplace, not to confront her, but to formally file a complaint. I contacted their HR, explained that I was the spouse of an employee and that another employee had been harassing me. They scheduled a meeting. I brought printed copies of everything. I sat across from 2 HR reps in a windowless conference room and walked them through the entire timeline. They took notes, asked questions. One of them said they could not share what actions they would take, but that they took harassment seriously, especially when it crossed into external parties. I left that meeting feeling like I had finally lit a match. Now I just had to wait and see what burned. Final update 2 months later. It has been about 2 months since I filed the formal complaint with Elliot's company, and I can finally say this whole nightmare is mostly behind me, though the shape of my life looks different than it did before. The first big thing that happened was that Iris got put on a performance improvement plan. I only know this because Elliot told me after it became common knowledge in the office. Apparently the HR investigation found that she had been violating company policies around workplace conduct. They could not prove definitively that she was behind the messages to my employer, but the pattern of behavior was enough. The comments she had made about me, the over-involvement in Elliot's personal life, the way she had positioned herself, it all added up. She did not take it well. From what Elliot heard, she tried to frame it as retaliation, said that people were targeting her because she was close with Elliot. A few of her friends in the office believed her at first, but then more people started coming forward. Turns out I was not the only one she had done this to. Another coworker mentioned that Iris had previously tried to isolate him from his partner by making comments about how they did not seem supportive. It became clear pretty fast that this was a pattern, not a one-time thing. Within a month, she resigned. Elliot said she sent an office-wide email about pursuing new opportunities, but everyone knew what it really was. After she left, the temperature in his office changed. People stopped walking on eggshells. A few coworkers reached out to Elliot privately to say they were sorry they had not said anything sooner, that they had felt uncomfortable but did not know how to bring it up. On my end, the harassment stopped completely once she was out. No more anonymous messages, no more emails to my work. Petra closed the HR case on her side, noted that the issue had been resolved. My record stayed clean. For a while I was just waiting for the other shoe to drop, for her to pop up somewhere else, but she did not. I heard through Simone that she moved to a different state, took a job with a smaller firm. I do not know if she learned anything from this. Honestly, I do not care, as long as she stays far away from my life. The harder part was dealing with the aftermath in my marriage. Elliot was apologetic. He kept saying he should have seen it sooner, that he felt like an idiot for not recognizing what was happening. I believe he means it, but belief does not undo months of feeling like I was being erased. We have had a lot of long conversations, some of them calm, some of them not, about boundaries, about how he talks about me to other people, about what it means to protect your partner even when someone else seems harmless. I told him at one point that the worst part was not even Iris, it was that he made space for her to do what she did. He did not mean to. I know that, but intention does not change impact. He listened. He did not get defensive. He acknowledged that he had prioritized being liked at work over being careful, that he had gotten comfortable with her attention. We are working through it, but it is slow. Trust does not rebuild in a few weeks. One thing that helped was that we started seeing someone. I know I said no details on that, so I will just say we are talking to a neutral third party and it is helping us get on the same page. We are not fixed, but we are at least facing the same direction now. I also made some changes for myself. I realized through all of this that I had gotten too small, too focused on just keeping things smooth. I started saying no to things that did not serve me. I set up boundaries with a few people in my own life who were not outright bad but were not particularly good either. I started taking up more space in my own days. I picked up a new hobby, nothing dramatic. I started going to a pottery studio that runs open sessions in an old warehouse near the university. It smells like clay and dust. There are wheels lined up on long tables, people working quietly, nobody asks questions. I go twice a week. I make wonky bowls and uneven mugs. Most of them crack in the kiln, but a few have survived. I brought one home last week. It is lopsided and the glaze pulled weird on one side, but it is mine. I made it with my own hands. Work has been fine, better than fine actually. I got assigned to a new project that has more visibility. Petra told me she had been impressed with how I handled everything, that it showed a level of resilience and professionalism. I did not tell her that half the time I was just running on spite, but I will take the compliment. Elliot and I are still in the same house, same town. We are not the same as we were before, but maybe that is okay. Maybe we needed to break a little to figure out what we actually wanted to keep. He is careful now in ways he was not before. He tells me more. He asks more. He does not assume I will just be there while he figures things out. Last week we were sitting on the back deck, the same one where he first mentioned Iris suggesting dinner. The sun was setting behind the neighbor's roof, turning the sky orange and pink. He asked me if I thought we were going to be okay. I told him I did not know, that I was not interested in pretending everything was fine just to avoid discomfort, but that I was willing to see where this goes. He nodded, said that was fair. We sat there a while longer, not talking, just existing in the same space. It was not a movie moment. There was no swelling music, but it was real, and right now, real is enough.